The Doctor's been separated from his TARDIS, sent off to parts unknown, after having to watch his companion, the Impossible Girl, die horribly. So, typical Tuesday. We find him being teleported in to a mysterious place by someone who basically disappears and turns to dust seconds after the Doctor gets teleported in. And he makes a declaration. Whoever killed Clara and took him here, they gonna get it! It seems this place is a clockwork castle in the middle of an unknown sea, 1 light year from Earth, and we later find out that he's traveled 7 millennia into the future, the long way around. He finds various clues, and after getting into some tough scrapes, where he nearly gets fatally touched by a strange wraith creature that takes the form of an old lady who was left to rot one day with nothing but a sheet over her, which drew in flies, which kind of stuck in the Doctor's nightmares, pursuing him. Anyway, this wraith, it seems to stop whenever the Doctor confesses something, like he's afraid of dying, and he didn't leave Gallifrey because he was bored, he left it because he was scared. And eventually he realizes that this thing wants him to confess about the hybrid. Whoever locked him in this prison, this Hades, wants to know about the hybrid. 2 warrior races suddenly thrust together to create something that'll stand on Gallifrey's ruins one day. Only he realizes something, that he is not going to tell anyone about the hybrid, even if he knew about it. So eventually he finds the exit. Problem is, there's a 20-foot thick, harder than diamond wall separating the Doctor from his freedom. So, as he starts punching his way out of the seemingly indestructible surface, slowly carving a path through it, by the way, over 4.5 billion years, we later find out, he tells this story. An emperor asked a child once, "How do you measure the first second of eternity?" Well, there's this mountain made of diamond. It takes an hour to go through it, an hour to go around it, and every century or so, a little bird comes and uses the mountain to sharpen its beak. But when the whole mountain has been worn away, that's the first second of eternity. Now you may think that's a heck of a long time, but personally, as the Doctor quips, he thinks that's a heck of a bird. And as it turns out, every time he tells a story, he gets a little farther along before the wraith fatally touches him, and he drags his dying body back to the teleportation chamber and uses his body as an energy source to reactivate a copy of himself stored in the teleport matrix, which causes everything but his skull to disintegrate. And it's these skulls that the Doctor keeps finding over the billions of years. And these skulls have actually been collecting in the water surrounding the castle. Slowly but surely, thousands upon thousands and eventually billions of skulls show up. But eventually, he does manage to break out of the wall, causing the wraith to collapse. Turns out, he was inside his own confession dial. And the dial is on Gallifrey. So he sees a kid, tells him to let the high muckety mucks know that he's back, and he is cheesed off. And he quips that the hybrid is him. So, the Doctor is back on Gallifrey. Somehow, someway, the Time Lords managed to pull it out of the pocket dimension and store it at the very edge of time itself. And while the Doctor journeys back to the old barn where all this started, where he learned that it's okay to be afraid, where he brought the moment, he's back. And the lady who owns the barn gets him some soup. Because after punching his way through a harder-than-diamond wall, he got a bit peckish. Meanwhile, all the cloister bells in the capital city are going off all at once. And while the wraiths in charge of the cloister are not really responding, other than guarding, as they usually do, Rassilon, who has either aged quite a bit or possibly regenerated, sends some guards to first check the cloister, and after a consultation with the Sisterhood of Karn, who's still kicking, sends some guards to fetch the Doctor, who, before finishing his food, literally draws a line in the sand. So eventually, the whole council, including Rassilon, come to talk to the Doctor, who proceeds to tell them to get off his planet. Now, Rassilon, he's clearly lived long enough to see himself become the villain, something I probably said before. But now he's a senile villain. He insists that the Doctor be executed. And that was his first and last mistake. Never execute a war hero with the troops who served with him. They purposefully miss the target, then throw down their weapons and side with the Doctor. Even the head war counselor, who's also still kicking. So Rassilon and the council get sent off to who knows where. Since it's the end of all things, they're probably not going to find much out there. So, the head war counselor just asks point blank, what does the Doctor know about the hybrid? Other than what's already known. The cloister, which is actually a supercomputer powered by ghosts and guarded by more ghosts, predicted the coming of something that would stand on the ruins of Gallifrey. Everyone thought it was going to be part Time Lord, part Dalek, but the Daleks would never allow such a thing. Anything that's not pure Dalek is a target for extermination, and they certainly wouldn't hybridize with a Time Lord. Except for that one time Davros sort of hybridized all his Daleks. But the Doctor insists that he needs help. So, he pulls Clara out of her time stream right before she dies. And then pulls the head war counselor's own gun on him and shoots him, which causes a regeneration from an old white guy to a young black woman. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Clara, who has yet to regain her pulse, right now she's between her last heartbeat and her final heartbeat, they head to the cloister. And the Doctor tells Clara about this one time a kid ended up in the cloister and found a way out. Because normally you don't get out of the cloister. Anything in there becomes a wraith. There's old Time Lords, a Dalek, some weeping angels, a Cyberman. Basically, it's a nasty place. But it's considered necessary for a Time Lord society. Eventually, with a bit of distraction from Clara, the Doctor manages to get through the secret exit to the cloister over to the maintenance area, and he steals a brand new TARDIS. Well, it's an old TARDIS, Type 40. The blank slate is cylindrical in design, and the inside is the classic original TARDIS from the first season of the Hartnell era, and it looks beautiful. Anywho, the Doctor takes Clara to the very, very, very end of all things to see if they can get her heart started. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. And while she's out, apparently time is fracturing. Turns out time needs her to die. But the Doctor doesn't couch with that. He's beginning to sound more and more like the Valyard or the Time Lord Victorious once again. And Clara is horrified by what she's seeing her friend turn into. So, after briefly talking with Miss Me one last time, who's still alive, and using a little bubble of reality that she created to watch all the stars die, the Doctor comes to a conclusion. In order to keep Clara safe, he has to make her forget about him. But Clara was listening, and so she used the sonic specs to futz with the device that the Doctor got in the extraction room. So now there's a 50-50 chance that the device will erase the Doctor's memories of Clara. And so he takes a gamble and loses. And as his memory drains away, he gives some last-minute advice to Clara. To run, to just be a good person. And again, he mentions never eating pears. This time he mentions it's because they're squishy and make your chin wet, but I like pears when they're ripe. What is a Doctor's beef with pears? Anyway. Eventually he wakes up in America, and he gets a ride from some guy on orders from Clara to get the Doctor to safety. So he ends up in the little diner that he, Amy, and Rory once visited back when he was getting ready to die. And so he tells the story of what's been going on to a woman in the diner who looks and sounds a lot like Clara. And he plays a song for her, Clara's song. And yes, it's actually the song that plays when the character's on the screen. Nice little bit of inside lore. And he mentions that when memories are no longer memories, they become stories. But the girl mentions sometimes they might become songs. So she heads back to the kitchen, which, as it turns out, is the control room of the TARDIS that the Doctor stole. And it dematerializes around him, leaving his TARDIS with a bit of artwork from Clara on the outside. So he enters, it powers up, it materializes a sonic screwdriver for him, and off he goes. Next stop everywhere. Meanwhile, Clara and Miss Me, are headed back to Gallifrey. The long way around. So Clara can meet her death after having lived a little. And there's a theory going around. It just so happens that the second TARDIS has a stuck chameleon circuit. So when it turned into a diner, it got stuck that way. It's possible after a bit of traveling and dropping Miss Me off somewhere, Clara went back to Gallifrey and reset the TARDIS to its original form so she could give it to the first Doctor, letting him know that the control system was messed up, but he'll have more fun with it than with the one he chose. And I like to think that's true, that TARDIS is the original TARDIS, just in a different part of its timeline. And so the Doctor travels, ending up on a planet in the 5300s at Christmas time. And he meets a fella named Nardal, sort of bald with a baby face, kind of funny in a silly way. And he takes the Doctor to a spaceship that crashed just outside of town. It seems he's mistaken for a surgeon who is desperately needed by none other than River Song, who married a space tyrant and whose head it currently houses a diamond which River wants. She doesn't realize the Doctor's changed his face, and so there's a bit of silliness involving the fact that the Doctor can't get River to realize that he is the Doctor. Meanwhile, the tyrant who blathers on about how he's going to rule the world and how he's going to literally eat his victims, he's just background noise. Eventually, they take his head off his robotic body. He's basically a cyborg. And run over to the TARDIS, which River likes to borrow from time to time and not tell the Doctor. Wonder how many times she's done this. Unfortunately, the TARDIS can't take off with the head inside and the body outside. So eventually it steals both the head of Nardal and a young man who River is currently also married to. And she also mentions having a couple of wives. So she's gotten around in the last couple 100 years. Yeah, she got a long lifespan. She doesn't look too bad for 200. Anyway, once the body is inside the TARDIS, because eventually it tracks them down, she manages to teleport the ship onto an ocean liner full of the galaxy's richest supervillains, basically. Even the staff have to have a body count under their belt. So, this is where she comes to sell the diamond. Meanwhile, the Doctor is a little unnerved by the fact that she has her own table on an ocean liner filled with supervillains. Because you literally have to be stupidly wealthy, but also extremely evil. So once again, River straddling the line between good and evil. I would say she's chaotic neutral, with a little bit of good and evil on the side. Anyway, eventually the buyer shows up, and it's a guy whose head can open up to reveal stuff stored inside. Very icky. And he also reveals that the patrons of the Ocean Liner's restaurant, they're also zipperhead aliens. So basically the Doctor and River are surrounded. And eventually the robotic body shows up and vaporizes the tyrant's organic head, thus freeing the diamond, and also seeking a replacement to use to complete itself. And it wants the Doctor's head. Luckily, no one believes that the Doctor is around. Even River goes on a tirade about how, despite her love for the Doctor, that he physically can't love her back. Because you tried getting love from a mountain or the stars. But then it clicks with her who the person she's been running with is. And also, yeah, when he is expected to be flabbergasted about the interior of the TARDIS, he hams it up. But now he's very subtle with two little words. Hello, sweetie. And so, the River, I should say the Doctor and River, escape in the best way possible. River picked this restaurant because it's going to be destroyed. A meteor storm damages it, and it crash lands on the planet Derulum, a planet of the Singing Towers. And she reveals that in 4 centuries, she digs up the remains of the space liner crash. Meanwhile, with the diamond in hand, or should I say in bra, the Doctor and River head to the TARDIS. Well, the Doctor forces River into the TARDIS, and then she teleports the TARDIS around him. Then they just get inside and stay there. They wait out the crash. Then the Doctor nudges the TARDIS forward a bit into morning, gives the diamond to some guy who is then told to open up a restaurant on that spot, right in front of the Singing Towers. And so, the Doctor and River celebrate a job well done in the resulting restaurant. And the Doctor gives her a custom-made sonic screwdriver. The one we saw her wield in the 2 library episodes. Way back with Ten and Donna Noble. He even scans her with it to put her memory and personality into the device. But River's sad because her diary and her story is coming to an end. But the Doctor tells her a secret. Well, besides his real name and all that other stuff, he tells her that a night on that planet lasts 24 years. So they're able to have some wedded bliss together before she goes to her destiny. And for now, at least, that's the end of River's song. Next, we head back to New York. It seems the Doctor has finally gotten around to figuring out how to fix all the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff that has plagued New York ever since that incident with the Weeping Angels. Not soon enough to save Amy and Rory, but, they lived out their lives, and they were good. And so the Doctor, with the help of Nardal, who he fixed, apparently he's some sort of, biomechanical robot, he cobbles together a device, meets a kid who mistakes him for Santa Claus, and gives him a little ruby that is extremely rare, only 4 in existence, and that will power the device. Only the kid, after hearing the Doctor's name, the Doctor, and getting a little pill-shaped thing and a glass of water for his cold, the kid mistakes the ruby for medicine and swallows it. Yeah. And what's more, the ruby, it apparently scans your memory and gives you what it thinks you want. And so, since the kid is actually a comic book aficionado, it literally turns him into a superhero. So after flying around the city for a little while, the Doctor makes him promise to not use the power that the ruby grants, because it's not of this world. Unfortunately, it's also not much under his control in his teen years. When the Doctor meets him again, he has to deal with the fact that he can't shut off his X-ray vision in a high school full of girls. Yeah, for most of us at that age, it would be heaven, but for him, it's the other place. But eventually he sorts himself out and ends up breaking his promise. He ends up becoming a superhero, a Superman knockoff who calls himself the Ghost. He speaks with a slightly gruffer voice. He wears a mask that covers a fair amount of his face. And he pulls a Clark Kent wearing glasses when he's not the Ghost. He's also the babysitter for a woman he's been infatuated with ever since they were young, but she ended up hooking up with his best friend, who proceeded to skip town after knocking her up, basically. So he feels protective of her and her daughter. And she's also a reporter. So this whole thing is basically just a Superman knockoff. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Nardole, and the reporter lady, to a lesser degree, are investigating a company that has headquarters in every capital city and also New York. Something screwy is going on, and the Doctor and the reporter lady converge to try and sort it all out. And we find out that the whole company is run by aliens. Not just any aliens, but brains with eyes inside of them, not just attached to them. And these brains can hijack a human body, and they are in fact the Zipperhead aliens that we met previously, who for some reason were loyal to the tyrant that River was briefly married to. But with him gone, they've decided to take over Earth. And they plan to use their spaceship as a bomb. They plan to vaporize New York City, with the exception of their headquarters, which can withstand that power. And that'll create mass panic, and all the world leaders, they'll flock to the various headquarters that were established elsewhere. And slowly but surely, the brain aliens will take over the minds of every world leader on Earth, to do with it what they will. Earth, that is. And through the adventure, the reporter lady reveals to the superhero guy that she cares more about his alter ego than she realized, which is rendered moot because he's forced to reveal himself to stop the spaceship from hitting the city. And once that's been dealt with, the aliens are forced to retreat, some seating themselves in unit personnel when they storm the building. And so, the day is saved. The superhero known as the Ghost can finally retire, because the Doctor is back after having sulked a while for having to part ways with River Song. And he and Nardole head off to right wrongs and make sure the tea doesn't get cold. They've got a lot of work to do. And that's the end of Season 2 of the Capaldi era for Doctor Who. When next we meet, we get a new companion, some old friends return, and we see a new Genesis. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, comic book superheroes are real. They just don't wear flashy outfits. They're everyday heroes. Like a guy who babysits for the woman he loves, even though the kid's not his. And remember, just because a song ends doesn't mean it won't be remembered.